Hi everyone, I'm Daniel. Welcome to Just One Truth. This is episode 8 of Decoding the Gospel of Thomas, and I'm going to pick right up at verse 98. We left off at 97 on part number 7. So hopefully everybody's up to speed with how this works. I'll jump right into it. Verse 98. Jesus says, "The kingdom of the Father is like a person who wanted to kill a powerful person. He drew the sword in his house and stabbed it into the wall to test whether his hand would be strong enough. Then he killed the powerful one." Okay, first here, remembering that Jesus is teaching a spiritual path, that the ultimate goal in Jesus' teachings is the kingdom of heaven within. A state of being like Buddha's nirvana. We're looking for a location where you are just blissful in life, happy, peaceful, loving. So, when we see something about killing a powerful person, we do need to read into it. We need to read into all of these verses. Jesus is not speaking literally. I don't believe he ever speaks literally. Anything that ever comes from him is a nested message somehow. This is a verse we're glad didn't make it into the Bible, right? This is how extreme right-wing Christians would justify Jesus gives us permission to kill people, right? Even though in other works he says, love your enemies. It's not enough to love your family and friends. So anyway, we go back at this and realize it's a spiritual teaching then. It's about us. It's about the reader. It's about the person on the path. The house is you. This house is yourself, your mind, your soul, your spirit, your awareness, your consciousness, all of those things. This is where you reside, within your own mind. That's what the verse is about. He then killed the powerful one. The question is, what is it within me? What is it within you? What is it within the viewer, if any, that is the powerful thing that you need to destroy? Is it shame? Is it hatred? Is it prejudice? Is it a false belief system? Is it something that prevents you from getting to that kingdom of heaven within? That is what you need to kill. That's what you need to destroy. If you harbor things inside of you that create feelings in you of anger, hatred, and shame, then those are going to prevent you from getting to that ultimate place of inner peace. Those things become skeletons in your closet. They become what possesses you. The demons, they become things that haunt you. They prevent you from getting to the kingdom of heaven within, or that place of love, joy, and peace. You're harboring something that prevents you from having the best life that you can have. These things can be very difficult to get a hold of. If you've been molested or hurt, or somehow you have experienced horrific shame, you might want to hide that. You might not want to let anybody ever know about those things. And that's your strong man that you need to destroy. You might have been raised believing that a certain race or a certain color or a certain religion are horrible, hateful people. And that is not true. Those are things that we get conditioned with when we're born. They're a part of our culture. We believe them because we're kids. We're programmed. We listen to adults. We get our brains wired that way and we don't question those things. That would be your strong man. Maybe you just really hate somebody. Somebody just rubs you the wrong way. Somebody in the office, somebody in the political arena. That's not hard to find these days. You got to turn away from that stuff. Perhaps you've been hurt from exposure to environments that were degrading, belittle, and demeaning. You were always told that you were stupid, that you were ugly, that you would never amount to anything. In some way, shape, or form, you have this idea of inadequacy formed into you, and you're constantly getting hit with it. Those are the things that you harbor inside of you that interfere with your capacity to be that love, to be that monk, that monastic, joy, peaceful, loving individual. If you're looking to be on this path and to succeed, you have to destroy all of that stuff. That's the strong person that you must destroy in your house. Okay, moving on to verse number 99. The disciples said to him, "Your brothers and your mother are standing outside." He said to them, "Those here who do the will of my Father, they are my brothers and my mother. They are the ones who will enter the kingdom of my Father." Okay, first of all, notice very deliberately you have brothers and mother. Nothing about sisters and father. This can't be the whole family. This is not a literal verse either. None of them are. So if you've watched my previous videos, you will know that my concept of male, female, mother, father are conscious and subconscious, the parts of the human that we're aware of, what they would have called carnal mind and soul. Your mother is the subconscious, which comes from the conscious. Check out my video on We're All Adam and Eve, and you'll see what I mean on that one. The brothers are like Cain and Abel. These are the offspring of your behavior. Go back to the Garden of Eden for a second. We know that Adam and Eve were the first two, but Adam was first, and he lived alone in bliss, like a child. And as he grew, a part emerged from him, what they call Eve. That's metaphoric. We know that God didn't literally grab a rib out of the man and create a woman from that. That's obviously a metaphor. So Eve in this case is the subconscious, and when the conscious and the subconscious go off and do things together, the subconscious is the one that goes out and parties and does bad things or does good things, that learns. It is your accumulation of learned behaviors. The offspring, Cain and Abel, kids, brothers, those are offspring to the behavior, to your conduct. We can metaphorically call the boys, the brothers, as pain, shame, hurt, love, joy, caring, compassion. All of those characteristics have a reference to being the male. They're the offspring of our conscious and our subconscious, of our male and our female. And they are good ones and bad ones, just like Cain and Abel. So brothers and mother, you see there aren't sisters, you see that there isn't father. It's isolated to brothers and mother, like Jesus' teaching from Genesis. Those are the things that you don't want. The male and the female parts, or the brothers and the mother, are the parts that presumably are the parts that wander off the path. They stray. They become representative of our life when we're not on this path. The ones who do the will are the mother and the father, the brother. You're looking for the characteristics that keep you on the path, that get you on the path. It's kind of an obscure one to understand, but if you can grasp that, the idea of the male, female, offspring as being representative of ourselves, the conscious, the subconscious, and the children being the memories, the etched in concepts that we have that we need to get rid of, unless they're good ones, unless they're ones that are about love and peace and helping the neighbor. We know what Jesus teaches and what he's about. We know what Buddha teaches and what he's about. They're the same thing, but taught in different languages and different cultures. So that's what that one is about. Okay, moving on to verse 100. They showed Jesus a gold coin and said to him, "Caesar's people demand taxes from us." He said to them, "Give Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Give God the things that are God's. And what is mine, give me." For this one, I don't think that it is a inner spiritual teaching, something that we must conduct ourselves with in order to follow on a spiritual path. This one seems more like a rule for the community or a rule for the path. Number one, that you have to pay your taxes. You've got to obey the law of the land. Nothing about this path permits you to violate the rules. God, the things that are God's, giving that to God. But basically he's saying here, whatever is your religious doctrine, go ahead and follow that through as well. But give me what is mine. Which means that at the very end of the day, if you're doing what Jesus is saying, and we're talking about Christ, we're talking about a Christ consciousness here. If you are following that, then ultimately the other things are going to be taken care of. You're going to be giving God what is God's, whether you believe in God or not. You're going to be conducting yourself in a way that is superior to the average person. You're going to be doing the right things. You're going to be loving. You're going to be caring. You're going to be doing all of those things if you are doing what Christ teaches. Then you're going to be following God's rule and you're going to be following the rule of man. Okay, moving on to 101. Whoever does not hate his father and mother as I do will not be able to be a disciple of mine. And whoever does not love his father and his mother as I do will not be able to be a disciple of mine. For my mother, but my true mother, gave me life. Okay, first, an important thing to note on this one is that there's just a small piece of text that didn't survive. Some of the Nag Hammadi was in very bad shape. This find was in very good shape. But here we do have missing piece of the original documents. For my mother, but my true mother gave me life. If I use the Marvin Meyer interpretation, they do venture an option here, and I'm going to go ahead and just read that for you. For my mother gave me falsehood, but my true mother gave me life. Okay, this one makes no sense whatsoever, does it? When you read those two first lines, the idea is that you must love your mother and father like Christ in order to be his disciple. You must hate your mother and father like Christ to be a disciple. What does that mean? I don't know what it means, but I can tell you this. What I get out of this verse is the idea that there are two mothers and fathers. This kind of shores up the idea that there is a mother and father metaphoric reference to the story. We know that in the physical world we have a mother and a father, our biological origins. When he's referring to another mother and father here, some people might say, well, the father is God. Who's the mother? That one doesn't work. The mother and father here must be very specific ideas, concepts, not necessarily entities, but metaphoric references to something. And what you see here is a reference to the mother, in one case giving him a life that isn't good, and a mother in another case giving him a life that is good. So the mother variation here is interesting. But the mother is who has you, who gives birth to you. The mother is also spiritually what they would have called soul, and it's okay to call it that, but in order to examine it, in order to look at it, in order to manipulate it, so to speak, in order to heal, we need to have it as something more tangible. So yes, the subconscious. The subconscious is really what is responsible for making us the product that we are. Hate, when he says hate or love, I'm sure he doesn't mean hate as in I hate you. Hate means stay away from, avoid. We know in the teachings of Jesus, it's all about love and caring and feeding the hungry, giving the shirt off your back. He's a very loving, open to everybody kind of a person. So hate in this case really means avoidance of. And yeah, there you have it. This idea is that there is indeed a mother and a father that is being referred to in these teachings, that is you, that is your conscious and your subconscious, or your body and your soul. Use the terms that you like. It still functions the same way. It's okay if you believe in God or not. It doesn't matter. This process is something that we do internally and independent of anything external. Trying to analyze the rest of the verse closer, though, doesn't help you out that much. For example, let's just say your biological mother and father. There's a lot of people who are raised saying, I respect my parents. They always did me good. They always helped me. They taught me. And maybe they did do a great job, and you're a wonderful person as a result of it. And you're already on this path. You're already naturally this way. But there are people who have been raised by mothers and fathers who abuse them, who hurt them, who beat them. Do you obey them? At some point in time, there are no caveats listed with this. It doesn't say, obey your mother and father, provided they are good people. And don't obey them if they're bad people. And then how do you make that distinction? You know, these things fall apart when you start questioning them. That's why a lot of people don't want you to question them. It's simpler if you don't. But once you do question them, yeah, they don't really hold up. And then liking your conscious and your subconscious, what's important that we know ultimately on this path is that we become aware of the fact that we are programmed, that we've been conditioned through our awareness and through our experiences to think, to believe, and to be a certain kind of personality, and that we become aware of that. Once we see that, we realize we need to turn away from everything that we've learned in the world, mother and father. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. You turn away from convictions that are not beneficial. So you don't discount their good teachings. Help your neighbor. Yes, let's go feed these poor people over here. Those are all good things. If your parents teaching you, those people are no good or those people are no good, you're still learning and you're still believing that. But those are the things that don't take us on this path. Those are things that prevent this path. So you really can't look at this and say you need to pay attention to your mother and father. Yeah, some people should pay attention and some should pay attention but never repeat. There's reasons to leave that behind. Anyway, okay, enough of that one. I think the important thing is that indeed this teaching is telling us that there are two mothers and fathers, and the mother and father that we're referring to are not your biological ones. They're the spiritual ones or the mental ones. The one that deals with your consciousness, yourself, your sense of self-worth, your belonging, your beliefs about yourself and others. All of that. Okay, moving on. Verse number 102. Jesus says, "Woe to them, the Pharisees, for they are like a dog sleeping in a cattle trough. For it neither eats nor lets the cattle eat." Okay, straight up, this teaching contains something nested inside. It's a personal teaching nested inside of all of the works attributed to Jesus, as far as I'm concerned. If you're not on board with that, you're not watching this video anymore. The Pharisees were a learned group of people trained in the religion. Their job was to basically interpret Scripture. When people were confused about how to act or how to please God, they would go to the Pharisees and say, what does the Bible say about this? Something as benign as, no, you can't go harvest your fields on the Sabbath. However, you can go pick enough corn to feed your family. That's not working. Those are the kind of things that the Pharisees were responsible for, helping people understand what was written in the verse. What is this saying? That they don't know it, that they don't get it, that they're blocking it. They're preventing those who wish to consume it from getting to it. That they don't let people get to the information, and they themselves are blocking the information. What we don't know is whether or not they actually knew this information. I would think not. Most people that are on board with this teaching would say, oh yeah, this is an everybody sort of a thing. If they're on this path, they're not looking for control and power. So to hide the teaching would be a tactic of control and power, which tells me people didn't understand the teaching. And that's still today. The modern Pharisees are the people who read the Bible, take it at face value, or interpret some of it, but leave much of it at face value. They don't have access to, either by choice or simply through ignorance, of there being something inside of here for every person, for every man, woman, and child, that there's a personal teaching in here. They hold on to the idea that if you give the church spiritual control over you, then you will go to heaven after you die. That is one way of interpreting the scripture, but that's not very much interpretation, is it? That's kind of just staying on the outside of the story. Once you interpret it, once you get inside, you see that there is something nested in there that is very personal, very much about me and my life, and I'm in charge of it. I don't hand this over to a deity to take care of at the promise of their return. I take active responsibility for my life. That is what this teaching is about. You can see why it's not popular. It's very difficult. It's easier to just live life thinking everything is fine. When I die is when it starts. That's a scary proposition to me. It really is. I think I would rather have control of life right now. The dog sleeping in the cattle trough references the people who are holding the Bible, teaching the Bible, and have no idea what is inside of the Bible. And they don't allow the people who are looking to them for advice, for understanding. They're only getting what that person understands. They're still not getting what's in the Bible. If you get what's in the Bible, you understand it on your own. You don't have to go to somebody else and say, please tell me what this means, and then hear someone's interpretation. Again, if you're on this path, you are already cognizant of that. Okay, we're going to move on then to verse number 103. Jesus says, "Blessed is the person who knows at which point of the house the robbers are going to enter, so that he may arise to gather together his domain and gird his loins before they enter." All right, what do we know the goal is in the teachings of Jesus? The kingdom of heaven within, that state of being of, I'm okay, everything is good, life is good, peace, love, joy, happiness. I'm living in bliss. That's the goal. The house is here. This is where that place exists as a state of being. This is the house. This is where it resides. This is where it is contained. When you are on this path, when you decide to go on this path, you will find generally that you've got a variety of characteristics that prevented you from being on this path before you started. You have your prejudice, your hate, your judgments, your convictions of things being a certain way because you were told that was the case. You have a lot of characteristics inside of you that were habitually the sort of things that you are now thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I can't do that anymore. They could be addictions. They could be behaviors. They could be all manner of things. I repeatedly do something that is a failure. I always get mad. I always get drunk. I always do something, somehow. Think in your own mind, what is it, if you're on this path, that you realize, this is not okay. This is my weakness over here. This is where I fail. Those are the things that you recognize, and when you see that, those are the robbers that are going to enter. Those are the people that are trying to take away. Those are the characteristics, the habits that are trying to prevent you from being on the course. And they're not literally trying to do that. They're not entities consciously thinking on their own. They're simply conditioned habits, neural pathways. They're behaviors that you have become accustomed to, and they like to live out. You need to have a game plan in place. You need to have some way to modify your behavior. Plan it out, figure it out. Oftentimes we get mad, for example, and you have an outburst and you spend time trying to make amends for it afterwards. And after that's done, you let it go. You feel better about it. You're kind of raw at first, but eventually things return to normal. Everything's okay. And bam, you get triggered and it happens again. And it happens again. And it happens again. And at some point you can see this cyclical process. You know you're holding on to something. You know that there is something wrong. You need to understand that it's going to continue to happen. Even if you have forgiven who the perpetrator was, if you've done whatever is necessary to change the way you feel about it, your habitual behavior can still be in place. And that's something you need to be prepared for, understand that it's going to happen, and set yourself up some alternative behaviors, things that you recognize at the moment. Oh, when this is starting to happen, I realize this is what is going on, that I'm cycling it through, that this anger is coming out again, or this desire to just go get drunk and forget about it all over again, or to go do drugs, or whatever the case may be, to be a controlling, horrible person over my family. You figure it out. Think about it for yourself. What is it in you? And for me, it was a lot of things. It wasn't just one thing. And I think that that's probably the case with most people. But it's to recognize at some point, this verse is about recognizing that this is going to happen. You're seeing it happen. You've had it happen before, and setting yourself up alternatives that you can recognize. So when it begins, you catch it and go, oh, I was going to do something as an alternative instead. Just think of the things that would work for you. That's what this verse is right here. Okay, let's move on to verse number 104. They said to Jesus, "Come, let us pray and fast today." Jesus said, "What sin is it that I have committed, or wherein have I been overcome?" But when the bridegroom comes out of the wedding chamber, then let us fast and pray. All right, this is a fun verse and potentially a gateway to greater miracles for yourself. Let's take a look and see what this is about. Fasting and praying in the physical world is about not consuming physically, not eating, and praying, consciously putting out an effort for something that you would like. Remember, you can't violate the rest of the rules of enlightenment, of finding the kingdom of heaven within. It's about you. It's about me. It's about what we want. It can't be about other people or property or things like that. This is about inner peace. This is looking for the kingdom of heaven within. As we're moving along life, we want things to be easy. Obviously, jobs, pay, income, things like that help us get on this course, unless you want to be a mendicant monk, which has its own set of obligations there. So praying is something that we tend to do. In the case of praying, you are intentionally reaching out to the idea of a God to hopefully provide some favor to you. In the spiritual world, fasting and praying is different. Fasting in the spiritual world is to not consume in your spirit. Remembering they're calling spirit, that part of you that we know is the subconscious mind. As you continue to pay attention to things, focus on things, get involved in things, the more you become that. The more you watch media of a certain left or right wing or whatever the case may be, the more you get involved in that, the more you become that. Fasting is letting all of that go. Fasting is not talking. It's not observing things. It's not listening to things. It's not even listening to music, which all evokes something inside of you. The idea is finding peace and quiet in your mind. Maybe just hearing the sounds of nature, the wind blowing through the sagebrush, the birds singing in the distance, the sound of the rain on the roof, something like that that doesn't have a story to it, but that we are not mentally consuming. We're not wiring our brains. We're not creating our spirit or soul that they would have thought was happening. So fasting is letting go of everything, finding peace and quiet, praying, visualizing. You can still ask God. The Bible tells us that We pray to God in our secret place, right? In our closet, in somewhere that's quiet. Yeah, it's up here. And that God rewards us in private. You can call that God or you can call it the cosmos. It's how it works. However, it has limited functionality. We all know that. There's times you want something and it just works out for you. And there's times you want something and it doesn't and you're devastated by it. How do we get things to work out more in our favor? That's what we find when we get down to the third line. When the bridegroom comes out of the wedding chamber, then let us fast and pray. Remembering what we've been doing all along here, male, female, husband, wife, conscious, subconscious, carnal, soul, Adam and Eve. This constant reference in this path, on this search to metaphorically making the parts of the human, the two parts of a human, as what we know in the physical world, the male and the female, where there's a union that needs to be made and there's divorces that happen. Consciously, when you start out in life, we are combined. As you grow and you begin to learn things, you might want one thing, but you do other things. You've split who and what you are. You have metaphorically divorced your conscious and your subconscious. And you want to remarry the two. The male is referenced here as being everybody's consciousness, male or female. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. It doesn't matter. The male in this case, or the bridegroom in this case, is our conscious desires, our conscious, clear thoughts. Not what happens when we're not paying attention, but what happens when everything is on the table and we know what we want. When we have made that combination of the male and the female back together again, the wedding chamber is up here. This is where those two combine. This is where the bride and the bridegroom become one, by becoming one person again, by becoming a whole individual, by clearing out all of the things that you've accumulated along the way that prevents that union from happening. You create a stronger union. Then the things that you are seeking, the things that you are desiring, the things that you want for yourself in life, in compliance with this path of getting to the kingdom of heaven within, happens in a much easier way. He's basically saying here, if you want to accomplish things, if you want to pray and fast and have things happen for you, make sure you've got a clear channel. Get rid of all of the things inside of you that interferes with your success. You may very well want success. Everybody does. Some people have tremendous capacity to accomplish things while other people have failings all the time. You have to look within your own life, though, and think to yourself, I am a limited channeling capacity. I've got a brain and I've got the capacity to channel whatever cosmic energy, spiritual energy, God force, Holy Ghost, whatever you want to call it. You've got so much capacity. And the more your brain is tied up with things that don't coincide with what you want, but you've got them tucked off to the side, you think they're non-related. You've got hatred, you've got judgment, you've got shame, you've got parts of your mind and your brain tied up with something that can only be used for what they are made of. So the shame area can only be used for shame. The hate area can only be used for hate. Whatever these sections are that you have compartmentalized within you can only function as a filter in the way that they are designed through your perceptions. If you want to accomplish things more, you have to make those spaces available to you by getting rid of the things that are not love, peace, joy. Super simple analogy. Imagine that you've got a hose and you're trying to get water to someplace and you're funneling water through it. But over time, rocks and dirt and mold and things start filling up inside of this water hose. So at the end, there's just a trickle. That's where we end up in life. And what do you do to improve the water, to improve the flow, to improve what you're getting through that hose? Is you have to clean out all the stuff that's in the way. You can't just force more water in or something like that. Literally, you have to clean out the conduit. And to me, that's the best way I can think of referencing this. Yeah, I know, overly, incredibly simplified, but you get the idea. Okay, moving on to verse number 105. Jesus says, "Whoever will come to know father and mother, he will be called son of a whore." Okay, this is a fun one, and I don't have a complete handle on it. First of all, we know the father and the mother in this case obviously can't be your biological father and mother. So it must be your conscious, your subconscious, your carnal mind, your soul, those two things, the male, female quality of us. The outer, I'm in charge, father. The inner, I take care of things when you're not watching, mother. The subconscious. So coming to know those means that you have become aware of this idea, this realization that, oh, I have become two separate people and I need to find a way to combine myself back into one by getting rid of the accumulation of things. How that equates to be called the son of a whore. Son is the offspring. It doesn't matter in life that you are physically a male or a female. The son is the things that have developed in our minds that are on autopilot when we're not paying attention. Whether you're acting out and you're angry, or you're just doing something without thinking about it, or whether that is something that is positive and beneficial. You're just helping or doing things without even pondering it. The offspring are good and bad. Remember Cain and Abel, we had good and bad offspring. The bad won, and we need to get it turned around. The best that I can do here is to kind of presume that that idea that that offspring came from the subconscious and not necessarily from the conscious. Anyway, it's a pretty obscure thing to say, isn't it? It's a way to teach this idea that is very nested. But we can at least see that much of the verse. And again, what we realize is that Jesus may or may not have existed. This is a teaching that, unlike Lao Tzu or the Buddha, where it was written down once and disseminated that way, the teachings of Jesus were passed along word of mouth, written down by a variety of people. This is actually the same type and style of teaching that we find from Jesus anywhere. There's not a lot, whatever we've got in the Bible and this right here. And we know that that went word of mouth and that it was written down and then transcribed and written down and transcribed and written down. We don't know that these words are exactly what we need to hear. There could be variations to them. So we're doing our best to make sense out of them, but I imagine if we had the actual words and understood them without any question as to the teaching, it would probably make things much more clear for us. This is what we've got. Let's move on to verse number 106. Jesus says, "When you make the two into one, you will become sons of man. And when you say, 'Mountain, move away,' it will move away." This one fits with everything that we've just been talking about making the two into one, the male, the female, having the marriage, making the conscious and the subconscious function in such a way that you're never having to say, "Oh my God, what have I done? How did I do that again?" Or "Why am I failing here?" Or "Why do I keep giving in to that?" Those are indications that we are separate beings. We want to become one being to where everything that we do when we're not paying attention is exactly what we want to do and is the right thing for not just us, but the people that are around us, the people that are in our lives. When you make the two into one, you will become sons of man. Sons of man is a reference to Jesus, but it's a reference to a lot of other people at that time. They were considered people that were knowledgeable, that were gurus, that were people that had a handle on life, sages, prophets. We will become that. This is Jesus again saying, we're all the same. You're just like me. I'm like you. You will become the sons of man when you make the two into one. This is that combination that we're looking for. The Christ nature, the Buddha nature, the Christ nature. And when you say, "Mountain, move away," it will move away. This harkens back to the verse just a couple ago where clearing out everything makes it so that you have greater capacity. Here we have mountain move away metaphor for accomplishing some Herculean task. I've got a big thing to take care of. But when I become one, I've got so much more capacity to do this and to have control over, to be able to influence the energy of the cosmos to make it unfold in the best possible way. It will move when you have accomplished that. Okay, moving on to verse number 107. The kingdom is like a shepherd who had 100 sheep. One of them went astray, the largest. He left the 99, and he sought the one until he found it. After he had toiled, he said to the sheep, I love you more than the 99. In this one, I see two great lessons. One of them is what I believe is the nested teaching, because it's a spiritual teaching. But look at it this way. We're living life, and in Buddhism, we're taught to simplify life. Do one thing at a time. Do it well. Be in the moment. You don't spread yourself so thin with commitments and tasking that you're not succeeding. Your mind is frazzled. Your days fly by. All of a sudden you're old and you die. Multitasking is something that we sometimes have to do. We have no choice. We've got a lot of things on our plate. But the objective is to clear your plate, to not have a bunch of things to do, to not have a bunch of commitments, to not have this sense of urgency all the time about your life. But that's the physical description of what this verse could mean. What would the spiritual version be? We become multifaceted. We become that person that has a lot of different qualities. Some of the qualities we like, some of the qualities we don't like. We have a lot of rooms, a lot of skeletons in the closet, a lot of chambers up here. And the objective is to become one, to become single, to become one mind. And that is what this verse is about right here. This is actually a different verse, but the same lesson that he taught with respect to the fisherman. Remember the fisherman in one of the early verses threw his net in the water, pulled it out, and he had a bunch of fish in there, but there was one big one. He kept the big one and threw all the rest of them back. Let those with ears to hear. These are examples of Jesus teaching the same lessons to different people with different jobs. He's correlating it to their life. And this is one that ultimately means, find one mind, find one way that you want to be, and be that way, and get rid of everything else. Okay, moving on to verse number 108. Jesus says, whoever will drink from my mouth will become like me. I myself will become he, and what is hidden will be revealed to him. Okay, another fun one, and another place where the teaching is telling us that we're all the same, that there isn't something special about this character called Jesus that is not something that belongs to us. We're all in the same camp. Whoever will drink from my mouth will become like me. If you listen to me and follow my words, you're going to become like this. I myself will become he. Okay, well, all of a sudden we're being told right there that this is not a human, that this is a state of being, that this is a consciousness, this is a Christ consciousness. So once we have consumed, drank the teaching adequately, then we are that. Yes, we're that same thing. Son of Man, Christ consciousness. In fact, this is actually how, once you step back from the theistic interpretation of these verses, this is how you get the return of Christ. Jesus, the physical Son of God, isn't coming back to save the Christians. The return of Christ happens every time somebody follows his path. In the same way everybody has a Buddha nature, everybody has a Christ nature. This is essentially the return of Christ. I don't like using those terms, though. It scares a lot of people. They put too much into it. And what is hidden will be revealed to him. You will be able to see that whatever happens in the world, that whatever manifests, comes from an energy source. And that energy source is motivated by one's beliefs and convictions. And that by changing one's beliefs and convictions, one changes the energy, which changes the outcome. Things become clear and they become evident that everybody is doing this. Everybody's life is unfolding in the way that their mind works. There are some exceptions. For the most part, though, the average person is living life based on what is up here and their convictions. And that in order to change their life, they must change those convictions. All of these things become evident once you move along this path. It's the same thing as Buddhism or Taoism or Hinduism if you get down to the nested teaching. There's nothing different here that other world teachings don't also include or teach as well. Okay, moving on to verse number 109. Jesus says, "The kingdom is like a person who has a hidden treasure in his field, of which he knows nothing. And after he had died, he left it to his son, but the son did not know about it either. He took over that field and sold it. And the one who had bought it came, and while he was plowing, he found the treasure. He began to lend money at interest to whom he wished." Okay, this is one of a couple of verses that doesn't exactly sound like what Jesus teaches in other areas. It has parts of it that do and parts of it that don't. Let's go ahead and just look at it anyway. If we look at it without interpreting it, we could actually look at this and say that a person who has that hidden treasure is like any individual who has this capacity. Everybody lives in the same energy field. Everybody has the same brain capacity. Everybody has the same ability to understand and comprehend. Yet, in the world, we see that very few people take this path that realize that their life unfolds based on their mind, based on how they process information, how they judge things, how they look at things. Most people are simply reactors to what is happening in the world, or a measure of the two. They make decisions, but then they react to what's going on around them. Every person has the capacity to understand that, but most people don't understand that. They don't look into it. They don't grasp it, and they will argue all day long that the reason they are the way they are is because they have to react to the world. They're never going to get it. That person has the field but doesn't know it. He passes it along to his offspring. They have the field and they don't know it. Everybody has this field, but every once in a while somebody comes along and says, "Oh, I found this field." This is where the verses kind of fall apart, though, where it says he sold the field and the one who plowed it found the treasure. I don't see how that would happen in the physical world. Does somebody else... Yeah. How do you sell your field to somebody? You could metaphorically say that is like one of the earlier verses where we talked about the owner of the field who rented it out to people and he wanted it back. Is it the same sort of a thing? But in this case, the person found the treasure and then loaned it out at interest, which we understand from other verses is not a good thing. As you're giving to people, giving with interest means giving with caveats. Being good and kind means giving without interest, without caveats. You're just helping, and then secretly you will be helped back. So the verse doesn't quite square up, and I don't know what to do with it. Have fun. Leave comments below. The next verse, number 110. Jesus says, "The one who has found the world and has become wealthy should renounce the world." This sounds like a physical verse, and it sounds like a good verse, although nothing in Jesus' teaching ever hints to this idea. In fact, Jesus teaches, "Blessed are the poor," or "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Jesus himself comes across like this mendicant monk image. There's no stories about the disciples hanging around outside his workplace waiting for him to get off work so that they could go do things. He's always being fed by people. He's traveling. He's teaching. He's actually living very much a Buddha-like lifestyle, this mendicant monk. So he's not about richness in that way. And when he's saying poor in spirit, this is a spiritual teaching. This means empty or devoid of those things that we carry in our subconscious mind, being the one sheep or the one big fish or making the two into one, all of those things. So for this to say become wealthy, you think, well, it can't be what he's talking about from a spiritual perspective, because wealth means you're full of things. You're trying to become devoid of things. So this just sounds like the idea that if you make money and you become wealthy physically, then become the mendicant monk without having to take up your begging bowl, so to speak. Live your life free and devoid of what's going on in the world out there. If you can do that with wealth, as opposed to with nothing, as opposed to a mendicant monk, that sounds great to me. I would prefer that myself. I think most people would. We all have the opportunity to get rid of everything that we have and become monks. Or wouldn't it be better to have the capacity to make life easy for you, to be able to travel, to do whatever you want to go visit, to go explore, to go learn whatever it is you want to learn on this planet, and not have to work, not have to be a product of what's going on. Anyway, again, sounds good. Doesn't sound like Jesus, but it sounds good anyway. Moving on to verse number 111. Jesus says, "The heavens will roll up before you and the earth, and whoever is living from the living one will not see death." Does not Jesus say, "Whoever has found himself of him, the world is not worthy"? Okay, I don't see this one as an instructional verse telling us what to do. It sounds more like, here's what happens if you take this path and if you succeed. It sounds kind of flowery. The heavens will roll up before you and the earth. The kingdom of heaven is within, so whatever this means, the heavens will roll up before you and the earth, I can't say. It's pretty words. And whoever is living from the living one will not see death. If you're living from this living idea, this idea of you being in charge, of you being the observer of your life, of what you do and how you do it, and knowing that there's a motivation behind it, and that you are, instead of just allowing yourself to act out, but you're managing the motivation, which creates the way that you act out then. That's the best I can perhaps frame that. Whoever has found himself, of him the world is not worthy, which really sounds more like what we saw earlier in these verses, the idea that the world is full of turmoil. It's a physical primordial soup of life. That when you get on this path and you separate from it, the world is not worthy. You cease being a product of what is happening. It's a modge-podge of people just acting and reacting. And when you get to a certain point on this path, you realize that and you step back from it and go, oh, I'm not going to be a part of that mess. That's what's happening, and it's not changing. The only way to change is to step out of it. That's how I view this verse. Moving on to verse number 112. Jesus says, "Woe to the flesh that depends on the soul. Woe to the soul that depends on the flesh." Okay, again, we need to put ourselves back 2,000 years and define what do they mean by flesh and soul. Obviously, we think about this in kind of religious or theistic terms as you have a body and you have a ghost, a spirit, an energy that when your body dies, that soul goes on. That is what they were thinking. Again, I'm not saying that that is or isn't the case. I've got my own beliefs on it. But what they're actually observing is how the conscious individual makes choices. The subconscious of an individual is what's running in the background. That is what has all of your learned behaviors, all of your conditioned beliefs, all of the things that cause you to feel or to act out in a certain way when you're not consciously thinking about it. There you have your flesh and your spirit, or your conscious and your subconscious. So when we define these, we have to be careful about what they're actually seeing compared to what we know today. Woe to the flesh that depends on the soul, or woe to the soul that depends on the flesh. In this case, it's really saying that if one or the other is in charge, woe to you. They need to be working in concert. Your conscious and your subconscious need to be together. This is that combining, making the two into one. That's what that is about, making the soul and the flesh both one. You don't want one depending on the other. You want them working in unison, in concert. Okay, moving on to verse number 113. His disciples said to him, "The kingdom, on what day will it come? It will not come by watching and waiting for it. They will not say, 'Look here,' or 'Look there.' Rather, the kingdom of the Father is spread out on the earth, and people do not see it." Okay, none of us needs to be rocket scientists to figure this one out, do we? This one is pretty straightforward, and it's probably in response to other teachings that were prevalent at that time. As people are saying, the kingdom is going to come, Jesus is going to return, there's going to be this mass exodus from the planet as those of us who are believers are taken away by him while everybody else goes to hell. And this is basically Jesus saying, ignore the church. Whatever you're being told right here, right now is what this is about. The kingdom of the Father, this joy, this peace, this loving existence in life exists now. It's here now. You can either participate or not participate. People do not see it. It's spread out everywhere. Easy enough. Okay, finally, the last verse here, we have number 114. Simon Peter said to them, "Let Mary go away from us, for women are not worthy of life." Jesus said, "Look, I will draw her in so as to make her male, so that she too may become a living male spirit, similar to you. But I say to you, every woman who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." Okay, this is our favorite fun one probably on here. This has been a contentious verse for a lot of people, and I need to say this, and it should be very evident. You cannot read anything from Jesus as plain language. Everything is nested. Everything is metaphor. Everything is hidden in some kind of verse. Everything that he teaches is about you and your soul. You turn the verse inward on yourself. You turn inward and you turn the verse inward. Then it becomes a living verse. And then it becomes a product of who and what life is, of what your life is, of what everybody's life is. And then, of course, the verses mean something to us by making ourselves metaphoric representations of what the verse says. This is the garden. This is the kingdom of heaven within. This is, in other verbiage from other locations, it is your closet. It is your secret place. All of these reference the mind, the self, the individual, the person. And there are parts of us, conscious and subconscious, referred to as male and female. That is a prevalent term throughout here. That is what they had to work with. So it made perfect sense. And it makes sense if we decode them in that way now. You'll notice that Jesus says, "Look, I will draw her in so as to make her male." He doesn't say teaching her or instructing her. It's draw her in. Remember in the story of Adam and Eve, Adam starts out as the male, the brand new one, and emerging from him is the subconscious, the female, Eve. All of those representations of the same thing. In this case, drawing back in, it's creating conditions for that subconscious to be back to the conscious. You are no longer acting out. Every woman who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven. In this case, the reference is simply that being male is being that person that is on this path, that has succeeded on this path, that has found the kingdom of heaven within. Male or female, doesn't matter. Ladies, if you're in a group out there where men are trying to tell you that they can help you out here, get away. This is not about male and female literally. It's about conscious and subconscious of every individual. And every one of us wants to become male in this reference. And that's just the way that it was written. We find it in all kinds of religions and spiritual teachings from the past. The male, the female reference is the conscious and the subconscious, or what they thought was the physical and the spiritual. The idea then of becoming male is simply another way of saying becoming your Buddha nature, becoming Christ-like, becoming the Son of Man, becoming male. All of those reference the same thing. They're just very obscure ways of teaching it in a way that had to be taught that way in order for it to go through the population, in order to go through the minds of the people who don't and never will get this. But when they get handed this package, they will nevertheless make sure it gets the widest possible dissemination. Okay, that's it. I hope you got something out of this. I did. I really did. I put more into this than I thought I ever would. I didn't realize it was going to be this way. And each video that's like an hour and some long takes like 20, 30 hours to make. I'm not very good at it. I edit a lot. Chop it down. All those jump cuts, those are cutting out mistakes. Okay, well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, but I hope that you've enjoyed this. Please feel free to leave comments. I don't do the supernatural because even though I can talk about it, I don't see any evidence of it. I don't see that in here. I don't see anywhere in this teaching does Jesus say, just worship me and don't worry when you die, I got your butts. No, that doesn't happen. That's not what is said. That's kind of what the Roman Paul said, but it's not what Jesus said. If I started this whole series over, it would be different. It would be more condensed. I did learn a lot. I'm sure I rambled a lot and thought a lot openly as I was doing this. So that's how you learn. Teach this stuff, you'll learn this stuff. Okay, I guess I will see you on the next video. Take care. Be safe.